Our relationship with our work life is so topsy-turvy right now. We, of course, are in the midst of two counterbalanced work trends. Job openings are plentiful, but many workers have not yet returned. So, why is this? Well, explanations include a mismatch between the types of job that are available and the willingness of people to fill them. Few want to work low-paying retail or fast food jobs, and high-end tech jobs require very specific training. Additionally, mothers of young children exiting the workforce amid continual disruptions to school and childcare. You can't work if you can't get care for your kids. And older workers withdrawing from the labor force. So our relationship to our work is funky right now. Sarah Jeffy's significant book has a clear argument. Work won't love you back, and it's true. You're told that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, whether it's working for free in exchange for experience, enduring poor treatment in the name of being, quote, part of a family, or clocking serious overtime for a good cause. More and more of us are pushed to make sacrifices for the privilege of being able to do work that we enjoy. If you've ever read Matt Cravey's hilarious observations about his work in real time, then you know. Work won't love us back. My father used to say that if you want to know the hole that you leave in your organization when you leave your job, simply put your hand in a bucket of water and then pull it out. That's the hole you leave at your job when you leave. Work Won't Love You Back examines how we all bought into this labor of love myth. The idea that certain work is not really work at all and should be done for the sake of passion rather than pay. Through the lives and experience of various workers, from unpaid intern to overworked teacher to the nonprofit employee, the domestic worker, and even the professional athlete, Jaffe explains how we've all been tricked into a new tyranny of work. And she argues that understanding that the labor of love trap will empower us to work less and demand what our work is worth. Once freed, we can finally figure out what actually gives us joy, pleasure, and satisfaction. So the world has some questionable career advice for us. Find a job you're passionate about. Whether you're graduating from college or changing fields, this is the commonly shared so-called secret to sidestepping a dull career or prevailing in a difficult industry. But is it really that easy? In her book, The Trouble with Passion, How Searching for Fulfillment at Work Fosters Inequality, the sociologist Erin Kretsch says maybe not. She shares new research on what she calls the passion principle, the idea that you should pursue passion in your career before fair compensation or job security. Now, there's nothing wrong with finding fulfillment at work, but passion goes further than that. It's loaded with the expectation that you'll do whatever it takes for your career, which Kesh says that this can lead to exploitation and inequality in the workforce. We don't have to nurture our passions through work. Historically, passion wasn't always a priority for workers. If you don't feel personally fulfilled by your job, it doesn't mean that you're incapable of performing it well. And it doesn't mean that you can't have a happy life, full of fulfillment beyond your career. Kesh calls this diversifying your meaning-making portfolio. Instead of drawing all your passion from one place, ask yourself, what are the things that excite me outside of paid employment? How can I invest time, energy, and attention in cultivating passion in that space? Such questions can help us see the divine in our lives and even our work. Jesus did the same with his friends once in this morning's very familiar text. When Jesus told his disciples that from then on they would be catching people, he did not envision how peculiar we preachers would sound when we try to explain how loving our neighbors is like fishing with a rod and reel. Part of the problem is that fishing is not an enjoyable experience for the fish. Fishing is a practical joke from which the fish never recovers. If you've read Moby Dick, you know that being hooked and reeled in is not fun for the fish. If you've seen Finding Nemo, then you know it's upsetting to the fish's father, too. Jesus could have chosen a more pleasant analogy. So let's not think of this as a fish story. Maybe this is about what happens when God shows up at work. The story takes place at a turning point in Jesus' ministry. In chapter 4, Jesus preaches in his home synagogue, and the congregation tries to throw him off a cliff. We talked about this a couple of Sundays ago. Jesus decides not to preach a second sermon to that particular congregation. Now he's preaching on the beach. He preaches in other synagogues after this story, but a time comes when none of the religious institutions will let him speak. The crowds follow Jesus everywhere. He discusses whatever is on people's minds, laughs, smiles, encourages the best comments and his sermon talkback, listens carefully, and sees through the questions meant to show the questioner's intelligence. On this occasion, the crowd is so big that the people in the front row are getting wet, like with Shamu at SeaWorld. As Jesus talks, 2 boats come in empty after a frustrating night. More seaweeds than fish to fry. The fishermen begin washing their leaves, algae, and tiny dories out of the nets. Jesus thinks it will be easier to teach while sitting in one of the boats, so he asks Simon to push out a little from the bank and anchor there. Simon keeps working. Every now and then he tries to look like he is listening, but he's tired and he wants his boat back. When Jesus finishes speaking, he decides to thank his corporate sponsor. Take your boat out in the deep water and let your nets down again. Simon is dumbfounded. Jesus, a carpenter, is telling Simon Peter, the big-time fisherman, where the fish are biting. Now, when Simon fishes, other fishermen line up to watch. Peter is a scientist. He tastes the water, scans the sky, peers into the lake. He knows how the fish run. He knows how stupid it is to try in broad daylight what has failed all night long. Jesus is a carpenter. He should stick to hammering nails. Simon answers, "We've worked hard all night without catching anything." But Jesus is already helping them row. All night long, Peter has rowed from one place to another. All night long, he has let down the nets. All night long, he has caught nothing. Now this carpenter is insisting they try again. You know the tone that teenagers use when responding to what they consider a really dumb request by their parents? Peter rolls his eyes and thinks, "We fished all night long without a minnow, guppy, or goldfish to show for it. But by all means, if you, master and commander of the sea, mighty Poseidon, Captain Ahab, Aquaman, Popeye the Sailor Man, say so, we will try again." Simon Peter knows this is not going to work, but because Jesus asked, the nets go over the side. Well, something strange happens. Something is wrong. Muscles of their arms tighten under the weight of the fish. The nets are bulging. This is the mother of fish stories. It's as if all the fish in the sea come to the surface at once. Fish leap into the boat in a mass suicide. There is such a catch that they yell for their partners in the other boat. They catch such a slew of fish that they swamp both boats. They are sinking under the weight of the fish. Maybe Jesus created this huge catch of fish, or maybe it's just that Jesus pays more attention and sees this phenomenal school. Either way, Peter suddenly realizes that Jesus is different. Peter was there when Jesus preached sermons, attracted huge crowds, and healed Peter's own mother-in-law. But this, knowing where the fish are, is what gets to Peter. Weird flex, I know. He falls to his knees. Go away, I can't handle this. Peter trusts himself and nobody else, and now he has met someone whose instincts are better than his. Jesus knows more than Peter knows about what Peter does every day. Peter asks Jesus to leave, but Jesus has no intention of going. Don't be afraid. God will make Peter more of the person that Peter should be. Jesus invites these fishermen to become disciples. They give up everything to follow. They leave their boats and start living like Jesus. Most people who come to church on Sunday recognize that Jesus is an expert in his field. Jesus' parables are wonderful. The Sermon on the Mount is fascinating. Jesus is a top-notch debater, but Jesus does not appear to be an expert on 21st century life in Greensboro. It's hard to picture Jesus at our office, our home, or our school. We understand our situation. We do not look for advice on how to do what we do from a poor, non-English speaking, brown-skinned Jewish rabbi who lived on the other side of the world over 2,000 years ago. Some days we do not think much about God. We keep what we do and what God might want us to do at a comfortable distance from one another. Connections between our faith and our work are few and far between. Maybe we do not think much about God because we suspect that we could do better. Giving our days to God might make our lives more complicated, but giving our days to God would make our lives better. When we understand that we live in God's presence, our days matter more. We are less likely to ask, how can I get through of all of my list of things to do? And more likely to ask, how can I do what I do with more love? Our lives could be better. Simon Peter, Simon, James, and John are in the middle of an ordinary day. This story is about how every day is an opportunity to recognize that God is at work. Every day we do the work of creation and maintenance, innovation and upkeep. In the frustration of never-ending paperwork and in the fulfillment of new projects, our faith can impact our work, even if we are in a profession that does not attract many saints, or our passion. We do not usually notice the way that God is at work in the daily details. What do the meetings, emails, and deadlines have to do with God? But God is with us when we act with kindness, when we share credit and did not have to, when we are grateful for the paycheck that helps us care for those whom we love, and when our work matters. God inspires deeper thoughts. God speaks in our conversation. God is at work when we feel energized about what we do. Our work will not always be exciting or fulfilling, but God helps us to see it with more understanding. There are moments when something holy happens, or maybe it's just a coincidence, or maybe it is both. Someone has a problem and we solve it because God has given us the gifts to solve problems. We're in a meeting that is going long and going poorly, and we tell God what we are feeling. We are praying for better results. We are talking to a coworker who's going through a hard time. She thanks us for our concern. God helps us care for her. Seeing where we experience joy is where God is at work. We make a difficult decision, and we know that we made the right decision. We say something thoughtful to someone who is not thoughtful. Someone says a gracious word about what we are doing, and it feels like a gift. Most of you know that I am mourning the passing of Fred Jappy, who was 89. Fred was father to my childhood best friend, Mark. He was a model of thoughtful Christian devotion and an outstanding human. He was an original thinker, a fantastic teacher, and a lovely person to be around. He influenced me greatly growing up at Del Cerro as a teen. I shared his great love of books, of quick ribald wit, and of unconventional theological discussions. This Mesa College chemistry professor taught me to be radically open to every argument, book, and speaker. He was so impressed that Mark and I went to hear the Reverend Ike in person. He paid for our gas and a milkshake afterwards for his son and me to attend Bible study fellowship in Oceanside every week for an entire school year, a 40-minute drive each way. As I've told you, my father, J. Usey, was a good man and an alcoholic who drank himself to sleep most every night. He wasn't mean, far from it, but he was absent from his family every night after 6 o'clock. Consequently, I cobbled together a Frankenstein father figure from men I knew whom I admired. Sam, my pastor; Bill, my campus life director; Mike, one of my girlfriend's father; and Fred Jappy. He wasn't the last person in my life to encourage me to think with deep curiosity and intellectual courage, but he was likely the first. Fred was not afraid to question any theology and to listen carefully. Along with my brother and sister, Fred was always shoving books into my hands that he thought that I should read, and then he'd want to discuss them with me. He was hungry for discussion and knowledge, and this in the context of a deeply held faith in Jesus Christ. As I said, Fred was a chemistry professor at Mesa College, and he taught a New Testament course that was open to all comers and always packed. I met many of his former students at my church, several of which have become Christians because of Fred's wide-open class. Every Sunday night, my church had an informal Bible study from 6 to 7. There was no youth group. With my BFFs, Jeff and Mark, Fred's son, we always went out to movies afterwards. Mark often invited his father, Fred, to join us. Fred was the only one of our 4 fathers at church, and Fred consistently declined, saying, "No thanks, son. I'm going to go home and sleep with your mother." He was quite clear that no movie could ever win out over having sex with his wife, Kay. One time when I went home from Baylor, I preached a sermon on the importance of failure. I actually preached it here my second Sunday ever at College Park in '94. It was a different type of sermon for me, more elusive and indirect, different from the psychological sermons that my mentor Sam preached. Fred found me afterwards and said, "This is exactly the type of sermons that you should be preaching." He blessed my unique voice. Of all the many people that Anne has met of my friends in San Diego, Fred was Anne's all-time favorite. We also shared a birthday. He would have been 90 in 3 weeks, and I was planning to be there for it. His East Coast funeral is February 19th in Washington, D.C., and I'm hoping to attend. Fred's work and life was imbued with God's presence, and all who knew him felt it. The things we do, the people we meet, and the work we create are chances to share our life with God. A lawyer pushes for justice. A teacher sees the light go on. A manager helps workers get along. A CPA makes the numbers less intimidating. An architect creates something beautiful. When we pay attention to God at work, we see what our lives could be. Amen.
Lost and weary traveler, searching for the way to go. Stranger, heavy-hearted, longing for someone you know. May you find a light. May you find a light. May you find a light to guide you home. Weary travelers, searching everywhere you go. Strangers who are searching, longing deeply to be known. May you find a light. May you find a light. May you find a light to guide